They took Vessa Marr's night rope on the cliff edge, where a woman could hear exactly how far mercy fell before it died. Not in a court, not under a roof. On the black cliff border, with the ravine breathing beneath her boots, and the whole pack gathered behind the warning stones to watch Cliff-Warden Soren Ash strip rescue right from her waist. The night rope hung across Vessa's hip in 7 black coils, dull as dead moonlight until touched by danger. Its knots had been tied by hands long gone from the border. Its fibers were said to be woven from raven hair, wolf sinew, and the last shadows cast by those who fell and were pulled back before the ravine could learn their names. Soren held out one gloved hand. Vessa Marr, by order of border judgment, surrendered the rope. Vessa did not move. Wind tore at her dark cloak and pushed strands of black hair across the rope-burned scars on her throat. The scars were old. Some crossed her wrists. Some vanished beneath her sleeves. No one had asked how many bodies a woman had to pull from a ravine before the rope began cutting her in return. They only saw the accusation tied around her now. Smuggler. Border traitor. Enemy hand. Soren lifted his voice so the warriors on the ridge could hear. She is accused of guiding hostile shadows across the black cliff under moonless cover, using rescue law to disguise treason. Until trial, her knight right is revoked. Her rope is seized. Her cliff name is struck from watch rotation. A murmur moved through the pack. Vessa looked past Soren to Alpha King Rorik Dane. He stood near the high warning stone, tall and unmoving in a black wolf fur mantle, his silver eyes colder than the moon behind him. Every warrior gave him distance without being ordered. Rorik was the kind of king men obeyed before they knew they had bowed. His wolf shadow lay at his feet, huge and dark against the pale cliffstone, its shape sharper than ordinary shadow, its eyes faintly lit from within. He had not condemned her aloud. That was what made it worse. He had only allowed Soren to make discipline look clean. He had not called her traitor. That was the mercy he would have named. But he had still chosen a quiet border over the woman who had kept too many of his men alive to count. Rorik's gaze settled on the rope at her waist, then on the scars the wind had exposed. Something in his face shifted too slightly for the court to read. Vessa read it anyway. Recognition was not rescue. Soren stepped closer. The rope. Vessa untied the first knot herself. The ridge went silent. Soren had expected refusal. Perhaps tears. Perhaps a desperate plea that would make his accusation look stronger. Vessa gave him neither. She loosened each coil with careful fingers, the way she had done on nights when scouts came back half dead from the ravine wall, too cold to scream and too proud to beg. The rope grew heavier as she unwound it. That was wrong. The night rope was always lightest in a rescuer's hand, weightless when thrown toward the dying, heavy only when used for false crossing, false oath, or coward's pull. By the 4th coil, the rope dragged at her wrist like wet iron. Soren saw her struggle and smiled. "See?" he said. "It resists a guilty hand." Vessa looked at him. "No. It resists being taken from the hand that knows its weight." His smile hardened. A guard reached to snatch the final coil. The night rope snapped against his palm. He cried out and stumbled back, 3 black welts rising across his skin. The pack stirred. Soren's eyes narrowed. The rope rejects interference during surrender. Nothing more. Vessa held the last coil. For one breath, memory rose without permission. A scout's broken fingers hooked around her sleeve, his blood freezing on her wrist. A boy from the Eastern Watch sobbing that he could not feel his legs. A captain whispering, "Do not tell Soren I crossed after dark," before passing out against the cliff wall. She had saved them while the court slept. Then the saved had been made silent. Soren had seen to that. Vessa removed the final coil and dropped the night rope into his waiting hands. It hit him like a body. Soren's knees buckled. A harsh sound went through the ridge. Warrior stepped forward, then stopped when Rorik lifted one hand. Soren forced himself upright, face white with strain. The rope hung from his grip, black and slack, suddenly far longer than it had been at Vessa's waist. "Secure it," he snapped. 3 border warriors came forward. They were strong men, cliff-trained, scarred by wind and fall. The first wrapped the rope around his forearm and tried to lift it. It did not move. The second used both hands. The rope lay dead across the stone. The third muttered a binding word and pulled. The night rope hissed. All 7 coils unwound by themselves and slid across the cliff toward Vessa's bare boots. No one laughed now. Rorik took one step from the warning stone. Soren moved quickly, too quickly. The rope is corrupted by her touch. It must be sealed before it spreads border sickness. He drew a cliff knife from his belt and pressed it against the oldest knot. Vessa's breath stopped. That knot was not decorative. It held the first rescue memory. Cut it, and every pull made before Moonless Witness could be rewritten as passage, not rescue. She stepped forward. 2 guards caught her arms, not because she feared losing the rope, because she knew what would be buried with the cut. Every nameless pull, every forbidden rescue, every man who had lived by her hand and gone silent by dawn. "Do not," she said. Soren looked pleased. Now she begs for the tool of her treason. "I am warning you." Rorik's voice came low from behind him. "What does the knot hold?" Soren did not turn. "Old superstition, Majesty. Border women call it memory when they need law to pity them." Vessa looked at Rorik. "Wait." The word crossed the cliff between them. Rorik's wolf shadow lifted its head. Soren cut the knot. The Black Ravine answered. Not with sound, with hunger. The darkness below the cliff surged upward, and every torch along the border went out at once. Warriors shouted. Horses screamed from the lower path. The rope whipped from Soren's hands and lashed across the warning stones, seeking an anchor it could no longer find. Then Rorik's wolf shadow slipped. It tore loose from the king's feet and plunged over the cliff edge. Rorik staggered, as if something inside his chest had been hooked and dragged downward. For the first time, the Alpha King looked afraid. The night rope flew toward the ravine after the falling shadow. Every warrior lunged for it. The rope burned them all. Then the last black coil struck Vessa's bound hands. The weight vanished. The night rope did not choose her. It returned to the last true hand that had never mistaken rescue for treason. Far below, in the moonless dark, Rorik Dane's wolf shadow hung above the Black Ravine, and the night rope tightened only in Vessa Marr's grip. No one on the ridge moved to help the falling shadow. That was how Vessa knew fear had finally outrun accusation. Warriors who had cursed her name a breath ago stood frozen behind the warning stones, their hands smoking from where the night rope had burned them. Soren Ash held his cliff knife in one hand and the severed first knot in the other. The Black Ravine breathed upward in long, hungry pulls, making cloaks snap toward the edge as if the dark below had found a mouth. Alpha King Rorik Dane did not shout. He went silent in the way men did when power realized it had handed its throat to the wrong law. Far below, his wolf shadow hung over the darkness, caught by one black coil stretched through Vessa's bound hands. It was enormous, even now, darker than the ravine around it, but its eyes had dimmed to 2 thin silver wounds. Every time the ravine breathed, the shadow dropped another inch. Vessa felt none of its weight. That frightened her more than if it had dragged her to her knees. The night rope was weightless only at the beginning of a true rescue. After that came the debt. Soren recovered first. Of course he did. Do not let her lower it. Several warriors turned toward him, desperate for command. Soren lifted the cut knot. If she casts the rope into the ravine now, she completes the traitor's crossing in full view of the king. You all saw it. The shadow fell because her corrupted rope opened a path. Vessa looked at him. You cut the first knot and exposed the sickness inside it. You cut the first rescue memory. Soren's eyes narrowed. Memory is not law. No, Vessa said, but law without memory is how men like you bury bodies and call the cliff clean. A dangerous sound moved through the ridge. Rorik stepped toward her. The rope tightened between her wrists, though his shadow hung below. A thin pain ran from Vessa's palms to her shoulders, not from weight, but from warning. The ravine was tasting the line, testing whether the hand above had courage enough to pull back what it wanted. Rorik's chaza fell to her bindings. Free her hands. Soren turned sharply. Majesty, if you release her, you validate her rescue, right before judgment. Rorik did not look at him. My wolf is below your judgment. That was not an apology. Vessa was glad. She did not know what she would have done with softness while the ravine held something alive. The guards hesitated only a moment before cutting the leather around her wrists. Blood rushed into her fingers in burning sparks. The night rope slid against her skin and settled there like it recognized old scars, not ownership. Not choosing. Remembering. Rorik saw the difference before anyone else did. She could tell by the way his eyes sharpened. What does it need? He asked. Vessa kept her gaze on the black line disappearing over the cliff. Silence from men who do not know rope law. Soren laughed once. Convenient. Vessa looked at him. You have spoken enough for the dead. Rorik's head turned slightly. Everyone back from the edge. No warrior obeyed quickly. They were cliff men. They did not like yielding danger to a woman they had just watched stripped. But then Rorik's silver eyes flashed, and every wolf shadow on the ridge flattened against the stone. They moved. Vessa stepped to the warning stone where the rope had caught. The old border mark carved into its face had gone black, not painted black, swallowed. The ravine hunger had climbed that far. She wrapped the night rope once around her left wrist and once around her right, leaving the center line bare. Rorik moved as if to help. Do not touch it, she said. He stopped. Good. A king who stopped was more useful than a king who meant well with the wrong hand. Soren's voice slid in from behind them. Majesty, consider what she asks. If the rope pulls your wolf shadow up, she will claim bond, right. She will say the king's wolf answered a traitor's hand. Vessa did not look away from the ravine. I claim nothing. Then release it. The words were smooth, too smooth. There it was, naked beneath all his law. He wanted the shadow to fall. Rorik heard it. The air changed around him, colder than anger, older than pride. Why would release serve border control? Soren bowed his head slightly. A corrupted wolf shadow returned through unlawful rope may carry crossing sickness into the throne. A dead shadow is tragedy. A tainted king is war. Rorik's jaw tightened. Vessa laughed under her breath. Rorik looked at her. She said, Now you hear how mercy sounds when he weighs it against appearance. The line struck him where she meant it to. He did not answer. Below, the wolf shadow slipped again. Vessa's breath broke. Not for Rorik, for the creature. A wolf shadow was not a pet, not a cloak of darkness. It was the part of a werewolf's soul that knew the road back from death. If the ravine ate it, Rorik would live, perhaps. He would still walk, speak, rule, but something in him would never return from below. Vessa lowered the rope one handspan. Soren shouted, She is crossing! No, Vessa said. Crossing has 2 anchors and a willing path. Rescue has 1 anchor and a dying weight. The rope pulsed. The cut first knot in Soren's hand began to bleed black dust. He looked down too late. The dust did not fall. It rose. Moonlight caught it and stretched it into a thin, trembling image above the warning stones. Not a full memory. The first knot had been cut too cleanly for that. What remained came broken, flickering, edged in ravine dark. A younger Vessa appeared in the moonlit air, thinner, soaked in rain, braced on this same cliff with the night rope cutting into both hands. Below her, something thrashed in the dark, a wolf shadow, huge, silver-eyed, torn across one shoulder. The warriors went still. Rorik stopped breathing. Vessa stared at the memory as cold moved through her blood. She knew that night. She had buried it under silence because the scout she saved had worn no name and no crown, only a blood-soaked command cloak and the broken scent of a royal patrol that was never supposed to cross after moonfall. In the memory, young Vessa screamed against the storm and pulled. The wolf shadow rose just enough for moonlight to strike its face. It was Rorik Dane's wolf. And behind young Vessa in the broken memory, holding the cliff lantern and watching her bleed, stood Soren Ash. The ridge did not accuse her after that. It listened. Not willingly, not kindly. But the Black Cliff had a way of stripping pride from men who heard death breathing too close. Warriors stared at the broken moonlit image hanging above the warning stones, then at Vessa's bleeding wrists, then at the severed knot in Soren Ash's hand. Vessa did not look at them. She kept both hands on the night rope. Below, Rorik Dane's wolf shadow hung over the ravine, its silver eyes dimming each time the darkness breathed upward. The line between Vessa and the falling soul trembled, not because she lacked strength, but because the cliff was testing every lie attached to the rope. Rescue had rules. The first was simple. A rescuer did not pull against the ravine alone. She pulled against every witness who had later denied the rescue happened. Soren closed his fist around the cut knot. The broken memory flickered. Vessa felt the rope jerk so hard it tore skin from her palms. "Open your hand," she said. Soren's eyes stayed on the memory. His face had gone pale, but his voice remained precise. "She has staged an echo." Rorik turned toward him slowly. "You were there. A border warden stands many watches. You were there when my wolf shadow was pulled from the ravine." Soren bowed his head just enough to look respectful. "Majesty, old shadows distort. The rope is already corrupted. It shows guilt as service." Vessa laughed once through her teeth. The sound was thin from pain. "That is your talent," she said, naming service as guilt before anyone can count the bodies. Rorik looked at her hands. Blood had begun to run between her fingers and down the black rope in bright, narrow lines. The night rope drank none of it. That mattered. A false crossing took blood like payment. A true rescue left blood visible so the living could not pretend the pool was clean. "Tell me how to bring him up," Rorik said. Vessa kept her eyes on the ravine. "You do not bring him up. I do." His jaw tightened, but he did not argue. That restraint was not forgiveness earned, only usefulness learned. "The knot," she said. "The first rescue memory has been cut. Without it, the rope can hold your wolf shadow, but it cannot find the old path back to the edge." Rorik's chase went to Soren's fist. Soren stepped back. "Majesty, if you force a warden's witness not open before tribunal, you break border chain. Every cliff ruling under my office can be challenged." "Good," Vessa said. Several warriors looked at her. She did not care. Rorik held out his hand to Soren. "Give me the knot." Soren did not obey. The silence was brief, too brief for anyone to call rebellion, long enough for everyone to feel it. "Majesty," Soren said softly, "think beyond tonight. If that shadow rises by her rope, every enemy beyond the ravine will hear that the Alpha King's wolf can be dragged through unlawful dark. They will test the border. They will whisper that your throne owes breath to an accused smuggler. Vessa lowered the rope another handspan. Rorik's wolf shadow dropped, then caught. Rorik flinched. Only Vessa saw how violently he stopped himself from reaching for the line. "Do not dress fear as kingdom," she said. His eyes cut to her. She did not soften. "You did that at noon when you let him take my rope." Rorik took the blow in front of the ridge. Then he moved. No blade, no shout. He crossed the stone between himself and Soren and seized the warden's wrist. Soren's guards shifted forward. Rorik's wolf shadow below gave one broken growl, and every warrior shadow on the ridge flattened against the stones. "Open your hand," Rorik said. Soren's fingers resisted for one breath. Then the severed knot fell into Rorik's palm. The moment it left Soren's skin, the memory brightened. Young Vessa appeared again in moonlit rain, her smaller hands wrapped in the same black rope, her feet braced against the cliff stone. The wolf shadow below her was unmistakable now. Rorik's. Wounded across the shoulder, one silver eye half blind, dragged from a route no king's patrol was supposed to know. The memory shifted. Soren stood behind her with the cliff lantern, but he was not helping. He held a ledger slate beneath his arm, and on it glowed a single line of border law waiting to be filled. Unwitnessed crossing. Vessa's breath caught. She had never seen the slate that night. She had only heard Soren say, "Pull, girl, unless you want the king's beast to vanish before coronation." Rorik stared at the memory, as if it had reached into him and pulled out something he had buried by command. "I remember pain," he said quietly. "Not this." Vessa's voice was cold. Men with crowns often remember the wound, not the hand that held it closed. His throat moved. No answer. Good. There was no answer that could lift his wolf. Vessa wrapped the severed knot around the living rope. The fibers shivered, trying to heal around the cut. It would not become whole. Not tonight. But it could remember enough to find the path. "Hold the warning stone," she told Rorik. He looked at her. "What happens to you?" Do not pretend that question can come before the pull. Something dark crossed his face. Then he gripped the warning stone with both hands. Vessa leaned back. The rope tightened. The ravine screamed without sound. Her shoulders nearly tore from their sockets. Pain ran through every old rope-burned scar on her wrists, throat, and ribs. Below, Rorik's wolf shadow rose one brutal inch. Then another. The ridge watched in silence as the woman they had called traitor pulled the Alpha King's soul back from the dark. Soren's voice came low and smooth behind her. "Ask her why she was on the ash route that night. Vessa Frazi." The rope slipped half an inch. Rorik's wolf shadow snarled below. Soren smiled faintly. "Ask her who sent her there before your patrol fell." The repaired knot flared black. The memory above the warning stone shifted again. This time, young Vessa's voice rang through the rain, raw with fear. "Warden Soren told me to wait here. He said royal blood might need pulling before dawn." The entire ridge went still. Then the night rope printed the next memory in moon shadow across the stone. A second voice answered from the dark beyond the cliff. "Payment first, Warden. Then we open the route." The ridge lanterns came back one by one, but none of them burned clean. Their flames were thin and blue, pulled sideways toward the Black Ravine as if the dark below had learned how to breathe through fire. Warriors stood behind the warning stones without speaking. Their faces had changed, not softened, not loyal, only unsettled in the way men became unsettled when a law they trusted opened its mouth and spoke in another man's voice. Vessa did not look at the moon shadow sentence burned across the stone. A second voice answered from the dark beyond the cliff. "Payment first, Warden. Then we opened the route. She could not afford to look. Rorik's wolf shadows still hung below, and the night rope had begun to take weight. There it was, the debt. It entered her hands slowly at first, like cold water soaking cloth. Then all at once, the line dragged downward with such force that Vessa's boots scraped toward the edge. Two warriors lunged instinctively, but the rope snapped black sparks at their fingers before they touched it. "Do not!" Vessa gasped. "A rescue line takes only one living hand unless witness, law is opened." Rorik tightened his grip on the warning stone. "How is it opened?" Soren answered before she could. "It is not. Not for an accused border trader." Vessa laughed through the pain. "You are still more afraid of witness than the ravine." Soren's face had regained color, but not calm. The severed knot now lay wrapped against the living rope, pulsing like a wound that refused burial. He watched it the way a guilty man watched a door he thought he had locked. "Majesty," he said, voice steady again. "The memory has already proven she was present on a forbidden route before coronation. She was not called there by command record. She was not listed under night patrol. She stood where no lawful rescuer should have stood." Vessa leaned back against the pull. Below, the wolf shadow rose another inch. "And yet," she said, breath tearing, "your future king came back breathing." Rorik's eyes moved to her. There was something in them now that had not been there before. Not trust, not tenderness, something sharper and less comfortable. The beginning of being unable to look away from what he had allowed. Soren stepped closer to the moon shadow image. Or perhaps she stood there because she had already made bargain with the far side. The rope jerked. Vessa bit down on a cry. Rorik saw her shoulders tremble. "Enough." "No, Majesty," Soren said. "This is exactly when enough becomes weakness. The rope shows fragments. She chooses which pain to dress as truth. Ask her why she never reported the route. Ask her why scouts vanished after she pulled them up. Ask her why rescued men went silent." Vessa's hands tightened around the night rope because they were afraid. Because Soren controlled the watch lists. Because every man pulled from the ash root was made to swear he had fallen drunk, crossed wrongly, or remembered nothing. Because no one wanted to admit the border had survived by a woman working outside the law that shamed her. But she said none of that. Words would spend breath she needed for the pull. Rorik looked at her. "Answer him." Vessa turned her head slowly. Pain had stripped all softness from her face. "No." The ridge went still. Rorik's jaw hardened. "No, I am keeping your wolf from being eaten. I will not spend my mouth defending myself to the man who cut the knot." For a moment, something dangerous moved between them. A king expecting obedience. A woman holding his soul by a rope. Then Rorik looked down into the ravine and understood the shape of the truth he had made necessary. His voice dropped. "Pull." She did. The night rope burned across both palms. Below, the wolf shadow rose through darkness that clung to it like tar. Its silver eyes widened when moonlight struck one ear, one shoulder, the torn line where the ravine had tried to swallow its back. A low growl rolled up from below, not threat, but agony. Every wolf shadow on the ridge shivered. Soren moved, not toward Vessa, toward the repaired knot. In his hand was gray cliff ash taken from the pouch at his belt, the kind used to blind trail marks during border storms. He scattered it across the knot before anyone could stop him. The memory above the warning stones blurred. Vessa felt the rope lose the old path. No, the wolf shadow dropped half a body length. Rorik staggered hard enough to crack the stone beneath one boot. This time, he did not merely look afraid. He looked wounded. Soren lowered his hand, ash still dusting his fingers. "The corruption is spreading. I have contained the memory." "You blinded it," Vessa said. I preserved the king. You dropped him. The words rang along the ridge. Rorik turned toward Soren. For the first time, the Cliff-Warden stepped back before his king moved. But Vessa could not wait for royal anger to become useful. She shifted her grip, wrapped the rope around her forearm, and pressed her bleeding palm against the cut first knot. If memory could not see the path, then it needed the oldest weight. Hairs. The night rope sank into her skin. Knot cut. Entered. Black light moved through the rope-burned scars on her wrist, throat, and ribs, and each scar answered with a thin silver line. The ridge stared as the mark Soren had called proof of guilt woke like hidden script. Rorik's voice roughened. Vessa. She did not look at him. Do not put my name in your mouth like concern while I am paying for your delay. His face closed around the wound. Good. Let it stay there. The night rope tightened. The blinded memory above the stone bent toward Vessa's scars. Instead of fading, it sharpened around her body, borrowing from the wounds the cliff had written over years. The ash route appeared again. Rain. Moonless dark. Young Vessa braced on the cliff, Soren holding the lantern. But now the shadow beyond him took shape. Not an enemy raider, not a rival alpha. A bound Dane scout knelt at the route mouth with a gag between his teeth and Rorik's command seal hanging from his torn collar. Blood ran down his temple. His eyes were open, furious, alive. The unseen voice spoke again from the far side. 1 royal scout for 3 crossings, Warden. That was the price. The ridge stopped breathing. Soren's face emptied. The night rope pulled the memory closer, burning it into the warning stone beneath Rorik's hands. Then the bound scout lifted his head in the past and looked directly at Vessa. Do not let Soren sell the 3rd route, he rasped through blood and rain. Below the cliff, Rorik's wolf shadow opened its jaws and howled once. The warning stone split under the king's hands. Inside the stone, hidden where only border wardens had ever sealed their records, a black route token fell out and landed at Soren Ash's feet. The black route token did not bounce. It struck the cliffstone at Soren Ash's feet and stayed there, flat and heavy, as if the mountain itself had been waiting to spit it out. No one reached for it. That told Vessa more than panic would have. A guilty man grabbed. A frightened man denied. But Soren only looked down at the token and went still, measuring which version of law could still survive the shape of the thing lying before him. The night rope dragged hard across Vessa's palms. Below the cliff, Rorik's wolf shadow hung half in moonlight now. Its forelegs had cleared the highest bite of darkness, but the ravine still clung to its lower body, stretching and thinning the shadow as if trying to tear the soul from itself. Vessa pulled one more handspan. Pain opened red behind her eyes. The route token pulsed once. Black light crawled along its edge. Soren lifted his hand sharply. No one touches that. Rorik's gaze did not leave the token. Name it. A planted marker, Soren said at once. Smugglers use black stone to mark false routes. She has drawn it out with corrupted rope memory. Vessa laughed once, breathless and bitter. Still calling everything false that remembers you? Soren turned his head toward her. Careful. Recognition of enemy tokens is often the first proof of crossing guilt. I know that token because I have pulled men out of routes you claimed were closed. The ridge shifted. Not loudly. Worse. Inwardly. Men began counting nights. Missing patrols. Injuries explained too neatly. Scouts who had returned quiet and never spoken of the dark again. Rorik stepped toward the token. Soren moved between them. Majesty, a king does not handle unclean border evidence before tribunal. A king does not let his warden decide what his eyes may see. Soren's mouth tightened. If you name that token wrong, every border judgment under my office can be challenged by anyone with a wound and a story. Vessa's voice cut through the wind. That is why he hid it inside your warning stone. Rorik looked at her. She was braced against the rope, shoulders shaking, blood running down both wrists. The night rope had sunk into the old scars at her forearms and throat, silver-black light moving beneath her skin like written pain. She did not look powerful. She looked half torn apart. Yet the wolf shadow below rose because she refused to let go. "What is it?" Rorik asked. "A warden anchor," she said. "Not used to mark a route from outside. Used to keep a sold route open from within." Soren's face went cold. Vessa felt that cold more clearly than the wind. Rorik crouched and reached for the token. The route token hissed before his fingers touched it. The king stopped. Vessa almost admired him for that. Almost. A proud man would have forced contact and lost proof by burning it. "It will not open to crown blood," she said. Rorik rose. "Then to whose? Warden hand, buyer mark, or rescue witness?" Soren smiled faintly. Convenient that she would invent the third. The night rope snapped downward. Vessa's boots slid to the very edge. Rorik moved on instinct, but she barked, "Stay on the stone." He stopped, with 1 foot forward. Below, his wolf shadow clawed at air, silver eyes fixed upward. It could see him, or sense him. The line between king and beast trembled like a vein. Vessa swallowed a cry and wrapped the rope once around her waist. The ridge went silent. That was a dangerous hold. Every cliff-born child knew it. If the ravine won, it would not only take what hung below, it would fold the rescuer in half and drag her after the weight. Rorik's voice roughened. "Do not bind yourself to my fall." She did not look at him. "You bound me to your border when you let him take my right." The words landed harder than any plea could have. Rorik's hand closed against the warning stone until his knuckles whitened. "What do I do?" Vessa's breath shook. There it was. A king asking for instruction from the woman his law had stripped. Not apology, not enough, but useful. "Witness law," she said. "You cannot hold the rope. You can hold the truth above it. Say what you see." Soren snapped. "Majesty, do not." Rorik looked at the token, then at Soren, then down into the ravine where his wolf shadow hung from Vessa's bleeding strength. His voice carried over the ridge. "I witness a black route. Token hidden inside the royal warning stone of the Black Cliff border." The token cracked. A thin line of moonlight opened through its center. Soren's expression did not change, but his hand moved toward the cliff knife at his belt. Rorik saw. "Do not reach." Soren stopped. Vessa pulled again. The wolf shadow rose another arm's length, and moonlight struck its chest. A black wound gaped there, shaped like a hook. Vessa stared at it. "That wound is not from falling." Rorik's eyes sharpened. "What is it?" "Anchor bite," she said. "Something below is using him to hold a route open." The token split wider. Inside, small letters burned in white-black fire. Route, Ash 3rd Pass. Status, paid. Anchor, Royal Wolf Shadow. Authorized by Cliff-Warden Soren Ash. No one moved. Not even Soren. For one breath, the whole border stood inside the truth and had no language ready for it. Then Soren smiled. Not broadly, only enough for Vessa to understand that exposure had not surprised him as much as timing had. "You think the route was meant to be opened later," he said. Vessa's stomach went cold. The token burned again. A final line carved itself across the stone beneath Rorik's hand. Current route location. Under the ridge. The Black Ravine breathed. This time, the ground behind the gathered warriors answered. A crack opened beneath the warning stones, black and deep, and from below came the sound of claws climbing upward. The first claws reached the stones before the warriors remembered their swords. Black fingers hooked over the cracked ridge, each nail curved and wet with ravine dark. Then another hand appeared. Then a third. The ground beneath the warning stones split wider, and cold air poured out from below, carrying the smell of old blood, damp fur, and iron that had been shut away too long. Soren Ash raised his voice above the panic. "Draw steel. Enemy crossing." The order steadied the warriors because it gave fear a shape. Enemy. That was easier than looking at the black route token on the ground with his name burned inside it. Rorik did not draw his blade. His hands remained locked around the warning stone, where Vessa had told him to hold witness law. His wolf shadow still hung below the cliff, half lifted from the ravine, half claimed by darkness. The night rope ran from Vessa's bleeding hands over the cliff edge, tight as a living vein. She could not move. That was the cruelty of rescue. The moment everyone finally believed her, she had no hand free to point at the truth. The first figure dragged itself from the crack. A wolf form, but wrong from hunger and binding. Its shoulders were too sharp. Its fur was caked in black grit. Iron rings bit through both forelegs, and strips of border cloth hung from its neck, torn nearly to threads. One warrior lifted his spear. Vessa saw the mark first. "Stop." The word tore out of her. No one stopped. The spear lowered. Rorik's voice struck the ridge. "Hold." The spear froze. The crawling wolf lifted its head. One silver ear had been cut nearly through. Beneath the ravine filth, a faded patch of dark blue cloth clung to its throat. Dane's scalp blew. The warrior holding the spear whispered, "No." Soren stepped forward quickly. Ravine mimics where stolen marks. Kill it before it clears the line. Vessa's arms shook under the pull of the night rope. "That is not a mimic. You cannot know that." I pulled him once. The ridge went silent. Soren turned toward her slowly. There it was again. Not fear of her lie, but fear of what she remembered. The wounded wolf form opened its mouth. No howl came out. Only a rasp, as if its throat had been packed with ash for weeks. Rorik stared at the scrap of cloth. "Shift," he commanded. The wolf form trembled. Nothing happened. Vessa's stomach tightened. "He cannot. Not with anchor iron through the forelegs." Soren's voice cut in. "Anchor iron is used on enemy scouts caught beyond lawful border." "No," Vessa said. "Anchor iron is used to hold living bodies inside a souled root so the passage does not close." The second figure pulled itself from the crack, then the third, then the fourth. All wore fragments of Dane's scout blue. Some had collars, some had iron through their wrists, some crawled in half shift, too starved to become fully wolf or fully man. Every one of them carried ravine dark in the mouth, as if they had been trying not to scream for a very long time. The warriors began to lower their weapons. Soren saw it and changed tactics without raising his voice. "Majesty, listen to me carefully. If those men were taken beyond the border, they are already legally dead. Whatever returns through an unlawful route is not your army. It is evidence of contamination." Vessa laughed once, broken by pain. "You killed them with paperwork before the ravine could finish." Rorik's face had gone empty. That was worse than rage. He looked at the first crawling wolf. "Name." The creature's jaw shook. No sound came. Soren said, "It cannot answer because it is not." The night rope snapped. Not downward. Sideways. One thin black strand uncoiled from the main line and struck the iron ring on the first scout's foreleg. The ring glowed silver black. A memory rose from it, small and jagged. A man in Dane blue, younger and unstarved, hanging over the ravine wall with Vessa's rope around his chest. blood down one side of his face. Vessa above him braced against stone, whispering, "Hold breath. Do not look down." The memory flickered. The scout gasped in the present. "Bren," he rasped. A sound passed through the warriors. Someone behind Rorik whispered, "Bryn Ashvale died last winter." The scout's ravaged eyes lifted toward the king. Not dead. Soren moved so fast that only Vessa saw the knife. He stepped toward Bryn's throat. Rorik was faster. The Alpha King caught Soren's wrist before the blade touched skin. The impact cracked through the air like bone, splitting in a quiet room. Soren did not struggle. That was the cleverness of him. He only looked pained. "Majesty, if I meant to silence him, I would have done so before he spoke. You tried. I contained a contaminated return." Rorik tightened his grip until the knife fell from Soren's hand. "You will not contain another word." The night rope dragged downward. Vessa cried out before she could stop herself. Rorik turned at once. His wolf shadow had slipped lower while he moved from the stone. The ravine had felt the witness break and taken advantage. "Back to the stone," Vessa said through her teeth. His face changed. The order came from a woman he had allowed to be stripped in front of his border. He obeyed anyway. He gripped the cracked warning stone again. The rope steadied, but the route below the ridge widened. More claws hooked over the edge. More scouts. Not enemies. Not all alive in the same way. Some were shadows around bone. Some were men with wolf eyes too dim to survive dawn unless the route closed clean. Vessa understood then. This was not a raid. It was a storage pit. Soren had not merely sold paths through the border. He had kept the men who knew it beneath the ridge, legally dead, physically useful, anchored in pain so the route could remain open whenever buyers paid. The night rope knew them. Everyone. That was why it had grown heavy when Soren took it. It had been carrying their unpaid rescues all along. Bryn Ashvale dragged himself one arm's length closer to the warning stone. His eyes found Vessa, and shame crossed his starved face. "She pulled us," he rasped. "When she could." Soren's voice sharpened. "Desperate men say anything to escape judgment." Bryn looked at Rorik. "We were ordered silent." "By whom?" Rorik asked. Bryn's gaze shifted to Soren. The Cliff-Warden smiled faintly. "Careful, scout. False accusation after border death carries no mercy." Vessa pulled. Not the wolf shadow this time. The side strand attached to Bryn's anchor ring. The iron split. Bryn screamed as memory burst from the ring in a black flare. Moon shadow words struck the cracked warning stone. Declared dead. Bryn Ashvale. Actual status. Route anchor. Reclassification signed. Cliff-Warden Soren Ash. The ridge broke. Not into chaos. Into recognition. Rorik looked at Soren, and the silver in his eyes became something older than crown law. Then Bryn lifted his shaking head again. "Majesty," he rasped, "your wolf did not fall by accident." Vessa's grip tightened. Below, the wolf shadow snarled once in agony. Bryn swallowed blood. Soren cut the first knot because the king's shadow was the final price. Rorik's hands tightened around the cracked warning stone until black dust bled between his fingers. No one repeated what Bryn Ashvale had said. They did not need to. The Black Cliff border had heard it. The route token had heard it. The night rope had heard it most of all. It pulled against Vessa's hands with a sudden, brutal weight, as if the ravine had learned that its promised payment was being named too early. Below the cliff, Rorik's wolf shadow twisted in the dark. Not falling now. Being claimed. A black hook had opened in its chest where the anchor bite burned, dragging it toward the split route beneath the ridge. The route below the warriors widened another handspan. and the trapped scouts crawling from it cried out in voices too hoarse for panic. Soren Ash looked at Bryn with almost gentle regret. You should have stayed silent. Bryn's starved body shook, but his eyes did not leave the king. He sold the Ash third pass. Soren Sahil. He managed it. Vessa's grip tightened. There it was, the word men used when treason wore a clean collar. Managed. Soren turned toward the gathered warriors, his Cliff-Warden cloak snapping in the ravine wind. For years, this border bled men into darkness. Rival packs tested every stone. Eastern raiders sent children with knives. Southern mercenaries bought old maps. Do you think borders hold because kings make speeches from warm halls? No. Borders hold because someone chooses which rot to let through and which rot to stop. You sold routes, Rorik said. I controlled routes, Soren answered, until she interfered. Vessa laughed once, though pain had made her vision blur. By pulling your anchors out alive? By destroying balance. The night rope jerked again. Vessa's knees struck stone, but she did not let go. The rope around her waist tightened until breath thinned inside her chest. Rorik moved from the warning stone. Stay, she snapped. He froze. His wolf shadow groaned below them, a sound no wolf throat should have made. Vessa forced air into her lungs. If you leave witness law again, the ravine takes him. Rorik's face hardened with helpless fury. Then he put both hands back on the cracked stone. The obedience cost him. Good. Some cost needed witnesses. Soren watched the exchange and smiled faintly. Do you see it, Majesty? She commands you already. That is the danger of letting unlawful rescue become debt. A king saved by a border woman becomes a king led by the rope. Vessa pulled 1 inch. The wolf shadow rose half that. Still afraid of living men owing women? She said through her teeth. Soren's eyes cooled. I am afraid of kingdoms ruled by private mercy. No, she said. You are afraid mercy keeps receipts. The root token at Soren's feet split wider. Inside it, another line burned. Contract stage. Unfinished. Required payment. Royal wolf. Shadow. Required blame. Vessa Marr. Unlawful crossing hand. The ridge erupted, not with shouting, with men stepping backward from Soren as if betrayal were a fever. Soren's jaw tightened only slightly. Forgery by corrupted object. Rorik's voice came low. The token is yours. The token was taken from the stone after she woke the rope. The stone split under my hands. Soren looked at him then, and for the first time his respect thinned enough to show anger beneath it. Because your wolf is wounded, Majesty. Wounded kings want one clean enemy. I will not become convenient for a smuggler's theater. Vessa lowered the rope another handspan. Every old scar along her arms burned silver black. The side strands of the night rope crawled outward, touching the anchor rings on the half-living scouts. Each ring hissed where the rope met it, but Vessa could not free them all while holding Rorik's shadow. That was Soren's design. Too many dying waits. One condemned rescuer. A king forced to choose which truth looked least dangerous. Rorik understood at the same time she did. His eyes moved from his wolf shadow to the trapped scouts, then to Vessa's hands. What breaks the claim? He asked. Soren answered smoothly. Her execution before completion. Several warriors flinched. Vessa did not. She had expected ugliness to find its oldest name eventually. Rorik's wolf shadow snarled below, and the sound tore through him. His fingers dug into the stone. You propose killing the only hand holding my wolf. I propose cutting unlawful debt from the border before it crowns itself as rescue law. Soren lifted his voice. If she dies before the rope completes the crossing, the contract cannot assign blame. The route collapses. The king's shadow is lost, yes, but the throne remains uncontaminated. Silence fell hard. Vessa looked at Rorik. Now, she said softly, you hear the full shape of the law you trusted. His face changed, not into apology, into something colder. A king finally seeing that neutrality had never been neutral. It had been a knife placed in another man's hand. Soren drew a second blade from inside his sleeve. Not a cliff knife. A witness knife, thin and black, used to cut rescue names from disputed ledgers. Vessa saw the target before anyone else did. Not her throat. The rope around her waist. If he cut that binding, the sudden release would snap the night rope backward and break her spine before the ravine took Rorik's shadow. Soren stepped toward her. Rorik moved. This time Vessa did not tell him to stay. Because he did not leave the witness stone. His wolf shadow did. A silver-black surge rose from below as Rorik drove his own blood into the cracked stone with both hands. The wound in his palm opened against the old border mark, and the witness law flared. His shadow below stopped sinking, only for a breath, but a breath was enough. Rorik's voice carried across the ridge. I witnessed Cliff-Warden Soren Ash drawing blade against the rescue hand before the contract completes. The route token screamed. Soren lunged anyway. Bren Ashfell threw himself from the ground and caught Soren's ankle with both starved hands. The blade missed Vessa's waist by less than an inch. Vessa pulled, not upward, sideways. She sent one living strand of night rope through Bren's broken anchor ring and into the route token at Soren's feet. The token burst open. Moon shadow rose from it in a full circle around the ridge. A contract appeared above the black cliff, written in Warden's script and sealed with Soren's blood. Ash 3rd pass sale. Buyers. Red, Mawpack. Delivery. Royal Wolf. Shadow at Moonfall. Public charge. Vessa Marr. Smuggler of enemy shadows. Rorik's eyes became pure silver. Then the last line burned brighter than all the rest. Completion requires the rescuer to pull the king's shadow up alive. Vessa stopped breathing. Soren smiled through Bren's grip. If she saves you, he said to Rorik, she finishes the crossing. The ridge understood the trap before it understood the law. If Vessa let go, Rorik Dane's wolf shadow would fall into the Black Ravine and leave the Alpha King alive with something vital eaten out of him forever. If she pulled him up, Soren's contract would name the rescue as a completed crossing. Either way, the Cliff-Warden won. Soren Ash stood with Bren Ashvale's starved hands still locked around his ankle, his face calm enough to be almost beautiful in the torchlight. There is your border truth, Majesty, he said. A king's life, or a smuggler's guilt. Choose quickly. The ravine does not wait for wounded pride. The night rope dragged so hard that Vessa's spine bowed. Below, the wolf shadow twisted against the black hook in its chest. Its claws scraped at empty air. The darkness beneath it rose in long, patient breaths, not frantic now. It had time. It had been promised payment. Rorik looked at Vessa. She could feel his need before he spoke. The whole ridge could. Kings were trained to hide pain, but a wolf shadow was older than pride. His silver eyes had gone too bright, and every breath he took came with the shadow's strain below. Still, he did not command her. That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. Tell me the law, he said. Vessa's laugh came out raw. Now? His jaw tightened. Yes. Now that your wolf is the one hanging. Yes. She looked at him then, and the rope cut deeper into her waist. Do not mistake needing me for believing me. He accepted that without flinching. Soren's smile thinned. Touching, but irrelevant. Completion requires her to pull the king's shadow up alive. The words are burned in the token. There is no softer reading. Vessa looked at the contract, circling the ridge in moon shadow. Completion requires the rescuer to pull the king's shadow up alive. The rescuer, not the smuggler. Her breath caught. Soren saw her see it. For the first time, true alarm crossed his face. Vessa shifted her grip. You wrote the charge too quickly. Rorik's eyes sharpened. What? He needed me guilty after the pull, she said. But the contract knows what the rope knows. It calls me rescuer before it calls me crossing hand. Soren snapped. Word tricks do not override border sale. No, Vessa said. Weight does. She looked at Rorik. If you claim the pull as debt, the route completes. I will not. If you call me loyal servant, the route completes. I will not. If you promise reward, protection, place, pardon, or gratitude before he is up, the route completes. Rorik's face closed around the words. Then, what do I say? Vessa lowered the rope one handspan. The wolf shadow dropped and caught, silver eyes blazing in agony. Say what I am doing, nothing more. Rorik turned toward the ridge. His hands remained on the cracked warning stone, blood still dark against the border mark. The entire pack watched him. Warriors. Scouts. Soren's guards. Men who had called Vessa traitor because the law had given them permission. Rorik's voice carried over all of them. I witnessed Vessa Marr holding a rescue line. The night rope pulsed. The black hook in the wolf shadow's chest loosened by a finger's width. Soren's composure broke. Majesty, you cannot name disputed action before tribunal. Rorik did not look at him. I witness my wolf shadow as the fallen weight. The route token screamed. The ravine surged upward. Vessa nearly lost her footing, but Bryn Ashvale crawled forward and hooked his broken hands around a stone near her heel, not touching the rope, only bracing the ground she stood on. I witness, Bryn rasped, that Soren Ash named rescues as crossings. Another scout dragged himself from the route crack. I witness. A third. I witness. The words did not free Vessa. They freed the rope. One by one, the anchor rings on the half-living scouts cracked open, not falling away, but loosening enough for the night rope to breathe through them. The 7 coils brightened from black to deep silver black, like moonlight seen through water at night. Vessa pulled. The world narrowed to rope, blood, stone, and the shadow below. Her hands opened under the strain. Skin tore. Old scars lit along her wrists and throat. The rope around her waist tightened until she could not draw full breath. Still, she leaned back and pulled. Not because Rorik deserved saving, not because the court finally watched, but because the wolf shadow had fallen under a lie, and rescue did not ask whether the rescued had earned the hand. The shadow rose. 1 brutal inch, then another. Rorik shook against the warning stone, every muscle locked as if he could feel the ravine's teeth leaving him one by one. Soren lunged for the contract circle. Bryn bit his ankle. The Cliff-Warden cursed for the first time that night. Vessa pulled once more. The wolf shadow struck the cliff edge in a rush of darkness and silver light. For one heartbeat, it hung between Vessa and Rorik. Enormous, wounded, terrible. Its chest torn open around the black hook. Then the hook snapped free. It flew toward Vessa. Rorik moved without leaving the stone. He drove his bleeding hand into the hook's path and caught it in his palm. The sound that left him was not human. The hook burned into his skin, blackening the flesh across his hand and wrist. The route token split with a crack that shook the ridge. Vessa did not thank him. She used the breath he bought. She hauled the wolf shadow across the warning stones. It slammed into Rorik's feet, then rose through him like night returning to its rightful body. The Alpha King dropped to one knee, gasping, his silver eyes turning briefly black before the wolf inside him steadied. The ridge bowed under the force of his restored shadow. Vessa stood over the rope, shaking, bleeding, half bent from the pull. Rorik reached toward her. She released the night rope. It fell at his feet between them. "No," she said. His hand stopped. "You do not get to touch the hand you allowed them to bind." No one moved. Vessa stepped back from the cliff edge. The night rope did not follow her. It coiled once around the broken first knot, then lashed across the stone toward Soren Ash. The severed knot opened like an eye. Across the cracked warning stone, the border law wrote in silver-black fire, "Rescue right stripped under false witness. Trial debt transfers to the hand that cut the first knot." The rope snapped around Soren's wrist, and the Black Ravine began to pull. Soren Ash screamed only once before pride found his throat again. The night rope had closed around his wrist like a living shackle, black fibers sinking through glove and skin until the old warden blood beneath answered. The Black Ravine pulled from below the cliff, not blindly now, not hungrily for any body it could claim. It pulled with judgment. Soren's boots scraped across the stone. Several warriors rushed toward him. "Cut it," Soren ordered. "Cut the rope." No one moved fast enough. Rorik rose from one knee. His restored wolf shadow spread behind him like a wounded knight. The black hook had burned deep into his palm, and dark veins ran beneath the skin of his wrist, but his voice held. "No one cuts another knot." The warriors stopped. Soren's face twisted. "Majesty, that rope is executing a crown officer without tribunal." Vessa stood a few paces from the cliff edge, swaying on bloodless legs. The night rope lay partly at Rorik's feet, partly around Soren's wrist, partly over the ravine, stretched between rescue and debt. Her hands shook so badly she had to close them into fists to hide it. "It is not executing him," she said. Soren's eyes snapped to her. For the first time, she saw real fear there. Not fear of death, fear that she understood the rope better than he had understood the law he used. "The ravine is pulling the trial debt," Vessa said. "If he falls, the debt dies with him." Bren Ashvale lifted his head from the stone. His anchor ring hung broken from one foreleg. "Then let him fall." A rough murmur answered him. Men who had crawled out of the root cracks stared at Soren with hollow eyes. Some were too weak to stand. Some still wore iron. Some had been legally dead for seasons while their bodies held open the passages he sold. No one on the ridge looked eager for mercy. Vessa understood. That was why she did not trust herself with anger. She looked at Rorik. If the ravine takes him now, every record sealed under his hand becomes disputed ash. His buyers deny. His guards forget. His victims remain legally dead. Soren laughed through his teeth. Listen to her. Still serving the kingdom that spat on her. Vessa turned toward him. No. Serving the men you buried under it. The rope dragged Soren another foot. He slammed to one knee. The route crack beneath the warning stones widened again. Not from creatures climbing this time, but from something beneath the border pulling back its unpaid road. Black wind rushed upward. The broken root token spun in place, its split halves glowing around the words Red Maw Pack. Rorik saw the name. His restored wolf shadow lifted its head. "The buyers?" he said. Soren's lips curved despite the pain. "Border bargains do not die because one rope remembers. Red Maw paid for passage. Red Maw will take passage." A sound rose from below the root crack. Not claws. Howls. Many. The warriors gripped their weapons, but no one knew where to face. The Black Ravine lay before them. The route had opened beneath them. The border they thought was a line had become a mouth under their feet. Vessa forced herself to step toward the night rope. Rorik turned sharply. "Do not take it again." She looked at him with a tiredness deeper than rage. "You do not command my hand away from the only law still working." His face closed. Then he stepped back. That hurt him. Good. She bent and took the rope. The moment her fingers closed around it, the pull changed. Soren stopped sliding toward the cliff, but the rope tightened around his wrist until he gasped. The fibers under his skin brightened silver black, and old marks began to appear along his forearm. Not scars, names. Bryn Ashville, Tomervale, Ridge Scout called, East Watch Morrow. One by one, the names crawled up Soren's skin like ink rising from drowned paper. The rescued men stirred. Some heard their own names for the first time in months. Some wept without sound. Vessa's voice went low. Every rescue he reclassified. Rorik stepped closer, but not too close. He had learned the distance grief required. "How do we open them?" Soren snarled. "You do not." Vessa wrapped the rope once around her bleeding palm. Witness by weight. Soren vent pala. That was enough answer. Vessa looked at Bryn. "Can you stand?" "No," Bryn rasped. "Then speak from the stone." Bryn dragged himself to the cracked warning mark, where Rorik's blood still darkened the carving. "I witness my name, Bryn Ashvale, declared dead by Cliff-Warden Soren Ash, held as route anchor beneath the ridge." The name on Soren's arm burned white. A strip of moon shadow tore from his sleeve and rose into the air. Not a memory this time, a record. Bryn Ashvale, rescued by Vessa Marr on Moonless Watch. Reclassified as enemy cross to protect Ash third pass sail. The ridge went still. Another scout crawled forward. "Tomervale, I witness my name." Another record opened. Then another. Then another. Each name burned from Soren's body and rose above the black cliff border. Each record showed the same pattern. Vessa's rope. A hidden rescue. A scout ordered silent. A warden correction. Arut sal. Soren shook under the rope, but he did not beg. He watched the records open with a hatred so controlled it looked almost calm. "You think this saves the border?" he said. "Those men were already compromised. I used what was lost to keep greater enemies contained." Bryn spat blood onto the stone. "You sold us." "I balanced losses." Vessa's hand tightened around the night rope. "Say that again where the dead can hear you." The rope responded before Soren could refuse. It snapped downward through the route crack and struck something deep below. The howls stopped. For one breath, silence rose from the dark. Then moon shadow climbed out of the opening in a wide, circular flare, showing what waited beneath the ridge. Not an army charging upward. A holding cavern. Dozens of route anchors lined the black stone walls. Scouts, messengers, border wolves, even rival pack prisoners chained in half-life to keep sold passages ready. Some still breathed. Some were only shadows fastened to iron. All of them had rope marks around their chests, arms, or throats. Vessa stared. She had not saved enough. The thought struck harder than any rope burn. Rorik saw her face. "You saved who you could," he said quietly. She did not look at him. "Do not make comfort out of a grave." The correction landed. He took it. Below, a deeper howl rolled through the cavern. The route token flared red-black. A figure stepped from the far tunnel in the moon shadow image. A massive wolf, man wearing a mantle of red hide. His eyes burned ember yellow, and in his hand hung a chain of purchased route marks. Soren lifted his head and smiled through blood. "Red, Maw has arrived." The figure in the shadow cavern looked upward, as if he could see through stone, rope, and witness. Then his voice rose into the ridge from below. "We paid for the king's wolf, Shadow. If the warden cannot deliver it, we take the border instead." The route crack split wider, and every hidden anchor beneath the black cliff began to wake. The hidden anchors woke beneath the black cliff, and the whole border began to breathe with them. Not as one monster, as many wounded lives remembering that they had names, The route crack widened across the ridge, splitting warning stones that had stood for generations. Moon shadows showed the cavern below in terrible fragments. Scouts chained to black rock, border wolves bound in half shift, messengers with iron through their wrists, rival prisoners used as living pins to keep Soren Ash's sold passages open. At the far tunnel stood the Red Maw leader, vast and red-furred, his chain of purchased root marks clinking like small bones. "We paid for the king's wolf shadow," he called from below. "If the warden cannot deliver it, we take the border instead." The warriors drew blades at last, but Vessa knew steel would not reach what had already been opened by law. Red Maw had not invaded through weakness in the cliff. They had bought permission. Soren stood with the night rope around his wrist and the names of buried scouts burning up his arm. Blood ran from under his glove. Still, he smiled. "Now you see," he said to Rorik, "this is what I kept balanced. One root sold to prevent 10 wars. One scout spent to save 50. One woman blamed so the border did not admit hunger." Vessa stared at him. "You did not feed the ravine to keep it quiet." The rope tightened around her palm. "You taught it to invoice." The words struck the ridge harder than accusation. Rorik's wolf shadow rose behind him, restored but wounded, its chest marked by the black hook burn he had taken into his own hand. He looked down into the moon shadow cavern and saw his men, his border, his law turned into anchors for sail. Then he looked at Vessa. "What closes it?" She did not answer quickly. Part of her wanted to say nothing. Let them learn the price of needing the woman they had stripped. Let the Black Cliff take every proud silence and chew it into justice. But Bryn Ashvale lay bleeding on the stones. The half-living scouts below were waking in chains. The root was not only Rorik's punishment, it was their prison. Vessa wrapped the night rope around both hands. "A souled root needs silent anchors," she said. "A rescue line needs named witnesses." Rorik understood enough to turn toward the ridge. His voice carried through wind and ravine dark. "Every scout who can speak, speak your name. Every warrior who knows a missing man, name him. Every wolf, shadow that recognizes kin, stand witness." Soren laughed. "Names do not close purchased stone." "No," Vessa said. "But they change what the rope is pulling." She stepped to the edge. Rorik moved with her, not ahead of her, not over her. His burned hand hung open at his side, blackened by the hook he had caught. He did not offer it to the rope. He had learned. Bryn dragged himself upright against the cracked warning stone. "Bryn Ashvale," he rasped, "Dane scout, rescued by Vessa Marr, buried by Soren Ash." Another scout lifted his head. "Tomervale, rescued by Vessa Marr." A woman from the Western Watch began to cry. "Morrow of East Watch. My brother. Missing after moonless patrol." Below, from the moon shadow cavern, a chained figure stirred. "Morrow," he answered weakly. "Alive." The ridge broke open with names. Not shouts. Witness. Each name struck the night rope like a knot being tied. The 7 coils brightened from black to silver black, then to a deep moonlit blue. The rope shot downward through the route crack, not toward Red Maw, but toward the anchors. One strand found Bryn's broken ring. Another found Morrow's chain. Another touched the throat of a border wolf whose shadow had nearly been eaten hollow. The Red Maw leader snarled. Those anchors were bought. Vessa leaned back and pulled. "No," she said. "They were rescued late." The first chain snapped. Then another. Then 10. Below, the hidden cavern erupted in howls. Not enemy howls, not war cries, but the sound of wolves remembering the sky. The souled root shook as its living pins were freed one by one. The tunnel behind Red Maw began to collapse inward. stone folding back around the passage his pack had purchased. Soren screamed again, this time in rage. If you free them all, the route debt comes back to the cutter. Vessa looked at him. Yes. The night rope around his wrist tightened. Rorik stepped forward. Soren Ash, by witness of the Black Cliff border, you are stripped of warden right. Soren's eyes flashed. You cannot strip a cliff office during active route breach. I can, Rorik said, when the office is the breach. The warning stones answered. Every old border mark burned silver, then black, then clean white beneath the moon. Soren's warden cloak tore down the center as if invisible claws had split it. The root token fragments at his feet rose into the air and shattered, each piece showing a sold passage, a paid silence, a name reclassified as dead. The Red Maw leader lunged upward through the moon shadow tunnel. Rorik's wolf shadow met him at the crack. For a moment, shadow struck shadow above the black cliff, silver black against ember red, King's wolf against Byre's beast. But Rorik did not fight alone. One by one, the freed scout shadows below rose behind his wolf. Thin, damaged, half-starved, but named. Red Maw had purchased anchors. He had not purchased their witness. Together, the shadows drove him backward into the collapsing route. The Red Maw leader roared. The border will starve without hidden doors. Vessa pulled the final coil. Then let it learn to stand hungry before it sells another man. The route closed. Not gently. The Black Ravine swallowed the purchased tunnel with a sound like 1,000 locks breaking at once. Wind slammed across the ridge. Warriors fell to their knees. Soren was dragged to the cliff edge by the rope around his wrist, boots carving lines through black dust. For one breath, he hung where he had made others hang. Vessa held the other end. Everyone watched her choice. Soren looked up at her. And for the first time, his face showed no law, no strategy, no careful contempt. Only fear. You are rescuer, he whispered. Rescue. Vessa stared down at him. The word had never sounded smaller. She could let go, the ravine would take him, and no one on the ridge would stop it. Instead, she wrapped the rope once around the warning stone. No, she said. You do not get the mercy of disappearing. She pulled. The night rope obeyed her hands, not because it had chosen her, but because she still would not mistake rescue for pardon. Soren slammed back onto the stones, gasping, alive, bound from wrist to throat in silver-black coils. Witness him, Vessa said. Rorik turned to the ridge. Witnessed. Soren Ash lives to answer every name he buried. The rope loosened from Vessa's hands. At once, pain found her. She nearly fell. Rorik caught himself before reaching. Bren did not. The ruined scout crawled close enough to brace one shoulder against her leg. Then another freed scout came. Then another. They did not touch the rope. They did not crown her. They only formed a living wall between Vessa and the ravine wind. Rorik looked at them, then at her. Something in his face changed completely. Not desire. Not possession. Reverence hurt into humility. Before the whole ridge, the Alpha King went down on one knee. Not to claim her, to lower himself beneath the woman his law had tried to erase. Vessa Marr, he said, voice rough. I stripped rescue, right from the only hand that had kept my border alive. I let silence look like order. I let discipline wear another man's lie. Before every witness here, I name my fault. Vessa's throat tightened despite herself. She hated that it mattered. She hated more that it was necessary. Rorik lifted his burned hand, palm open. From this night, no ruler, warden, king, or council may strip a rescuer's right without living witness, named weight and open border record. No rescue shall be rewritten as crossing by the hand that fears what was saved. The warning stones flared. The law took, not because he was king, because the witnesses answered. Witnessed, Bryn rasped. Witnessed, the scouts echoed. Witnessed, said the warriors who had once stood silent. The night rope coiled at Vessa's feet. Light moved through the severed first knot. It did not heal fully. Some cuts became part of the record, but the knot closed enough to hold memory without bleeding. Rorik rose slowly. I will return the rope, he said. Vessa looked at him. It was never yours to return. The words hit him. He bowed his head. Then I will stand aside while you take back what was yours. She bent and lifted the night rope. It was light in her hands now, not weightless. Never that again. It carried Bryn, Morrow, Tomer, the unnamed, the nearly dead, the men below, the wolves above, and the wound of the first knot. But it did not drag like accusation anymore. Vessa fastened it around her waist. The ridge watched. No one dared call her smuggler. Rorik stepped close, stopping at the distance she had taught him. Will you leave? He asked. Yes, she said. His face tightened, but he did not command. Where? She looked toward the line of freed scouts being lifted from the route crack, toward Bryn breathing under the moon, toward Soren bound alive beside the shattered token. To the lower watch, she said. There are men under your border who still need pulling out. Rorik's voice lowered. Then I follow behind you. Vessa looked at him. Not beside? She asked. His silver eyes held hers. Not until you invite me there. The answer did not mend what he had done, but it did not ask her to pretend either. Vessa turned from him and walked along the black cliff border with the night rope at her waist, blood drying on her palms and moonlight catching in the scars no one would ever again call proof of guilt. Behind her, Alpha King Rorik Dane followed at a respectful distance, carrying the broken route token in his burned hand. The ravine still breathed. The border still hung above darkness. But by dawn, every warning stone bore a new line of law in silver-black fire. A rope that has held the dying knows the hand that paid the weight. And beneath it, written by the first rescue memory, returned to the cliff, Vessa Marr, night rescuer of the Black Border.